Alright, today I'm going to be showing you guys how you can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. And we're going to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators using three simple, easy steps. We're first going to find common denominators. Second, we're going to change the original fractions into new equivalent fractions using the common denominator. And the last step, the third step, is solve. And that's my favorite because after we do that, we will have an answer. For our first example, we're going to take a look at an addition problem. And this problem is 1/3 plus 2/5. And the first thing that you guys should notice is the denominators here are different. So we're going to have to find a common denominator before we can add them. So our first step is to find that common denominator. An easy way for us to find the common denominator is to multiply the two denominators in our problem. So I can multiply 3 by 5, and that's going to give me 15, and 15 now becomes our common denominator. So now that we have our common denominator, I've written common denominator, or CD for short, equals 15 on in the top right hand corner here, just so that we don't forget what our common denominator is. And so now we've moved on to step 2. And step 2 is we need to find equivalent fractions for 1/3 and 2/5. So in order to do that, I'm going to write or rewrite 1/3 down here, and I'm going to set it equal to an equivalent fraction that has the common denominator of 15 as its denominator. So I need to figure out what is going to go up here, what my numerator is going to be in the equivalent fraction. And in order to find out what goes in the numerator of our new equivalent fraction, I need to first ask myself, what did I have to do to the 3 in 1/3, the denominator in 1/3, to get the common denominator of 15? Well, if I look at 3 and 15, I know that I can multiply my 3 down here by 5, and that's going to give me 15. And as we've talked about before, whatever I do to the denominator or to the bottom, I got to do to the top or the numerator. So if I multiply this 3 by 5, I also have to multiply the 1 in the numerator by 5. And so 1 times 5 we know is equal to 5. And lo and behold, we have an equivalent fraction for 1/3. It is 5 over 15, or 5/15. So now that I've found an equivalent fraction for 1/3, I need to do the same thing for 2/5. I need to find an equivalent fraction for 2/5 that has the common denominator 15 as its denominator. And so we have to do the same thing that we did for 1/3. We need to figure out what this numerator over 15 is going to be. And so I asked myself the same question as I asked about the 3 and 1/3. I need to figure out, what do I do to the 5, or the denominator in 2/5, to get 15, or the common denominator in my equivalent fraction. And it turns out I need to multiply the 5 by 3 to get 15. And so since I did that to my denominator, or the bottom, I need to also do that to the top, or my numerator of 2. So I need to multiply the 2 here by 3 as well, and that's going to give me 6. So now I have the equivalent fraction for 2/5 figured out. And I have my two equivalent fractions before me here, 5/15 and 6/15. So now we can actually move on to step 3 and solve our problem here of 1/3 plus 2/5. Okay, so now we can go on to step 3 and solve. And just like before, where I had the common denominator written in the top right-hand corner of the screen, I did the same thing for our equivalent fractions, or EF for short. I just want us to remember what we did before in the last step, and that was to take 1/3 and write an equivalent fraction for 1/3 as 5/15, and then we did the same thing for 2/5, and we rewrote 2/5 as the equivalent fraction 6/15. Alright, so now this last part's really easy. So we have two fractions that we can work with now because they have the same denominator. They have that common denominator of 15. And now all we do is we just add our two numerators here, 5 and 6, and that's going to give us 11. And then we put the answer to that over our common denominator of 15. And so we have the answer 11/15. So now that we've done an addition example, I want to show a subtracting or subtraction example. And in this example, we have 5/6 minus 1/4. And just like the addition problem, we're going to follow the same 3 steps to find the answer or the difference between 5/6 and 1/4. So the first step is we have to find that common denominator between 6 and 4. And we're going to do the same thing we did as before. We're just going to multiply the two denominators in our problem, 6 by 14, 6 times 14. That's going to give us 24. And so 24 is our common denominator for this second example. Alright, so we can move on to our second step now that we've found the common denominator. And just like before, I wrote our common denominator in the top right-hand corner. So CD, short for common denominator, is equal to 24. And now we can move on to the second step, which is to find equivalent fractions for 5/6 and 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and start with 5/6. And I'm just going to go ahead and write 5/6 down here. And that's going to be equal to an equivalent fraction with 24 as the denominator. So we need to set each of these fractions, 5/6 and 1/4, equal to a fraction that has the common denominator of 24 as its denominator. And so we have to figure out again what the numerator of this new equivalent fraction is going to be. So we need to ask ourselves the same question as we did before when we were finding equivalent fractions, and that is, what did I have to do to this 6, this denominator of 6, in order to get the common denominator of 24? Well, I know that 6 times 4 is going to give me 24. And whatever I do to the bottom or to the denominator, I also have to do to the top or the numerator. So I'm going to multiply the 5 in the numerator by 4 as well. And 5 times 4 is going to give me 20. And so we have our first equivalent fraction, which is 20 over 24, 20 24ths. And so now we need to move on and find an equivalent fraction for 1/4 using the common denominator of 24. Alright, so we've set 1/4 equal to a fraction that has the common denominator. And now we need to figure out what our numerator over 24 is going to be. So just like last time, my focus is on the 4 and 1/4, and I need to ask myself, okay, what do I need to do to this 4 to get 24? Well, I need to multiply it by 6, because 4 times 6 is 24. And if I multiplied by 6 in the bottom, I also need to multiply by 6 in the top. So I'm going to multiply the numerator 1 by 6. And that's going to give me 6. And so now I have two new fractions that I can work with. I have 20 over 24, or 20 24ths. And I have 6 over 24, or 6 24ths. And so now that I have my two equivalent fractions, now I can go ahead and move on to step 3, which is to solve my problem. Alright, so now we're ready to solve. Just like before, I have the two equivalent fractions written in the top right-hand corner. So EF stands for equivalent fractions. And my two equivalent fractions are 20 24ths and 6 24ths. And so now it's going to be really easy for me to solve this problem, because now we have common denominators. So I'm going to rewrite 20 24ths minus, and always pay attention to whatever operation sign is given in the problem. So I have 20 24ths minus 6 24ths. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the numerators. I'm going to subtract 6 from 20. And that's going to give me 14. And I'm going to put that answer over my common denominator of 24. And that is my answer. 14 over 24. Alright, so now that we've seen two examples, one of an addition problem and one of a subtraction problem, now I want you guys to try adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So you can go ahead and actually pause the video right now and try to work out these two problems on a sheet of paper, on a whiteboard, and see if you can follow the steps, the 3 steps, and find the correct answer. And if you need to go back in the video and review those 3 steps, or take another look at the 2 examples, go ahead and do that. And I'll be with you guys here in a moment to show you the solutions to these 2 problems. Alright, so I hope you guys were able to solve 2/3 plus 3/7. And now I want to take you through the 3 steps in solving this problem. So first of all, we need to find the common denominator, which I've written in red up here, CD for short. And I'm going to find the common denominator by multiplying the 2 denominators in our problem here. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 7, and that's going to give me 21. And so now I've found the common denominator for 2/3 and 3/7, and it is 21. And now that I have the common denominator of 21, I need to find my equivalent fractions, or the EF here written in orange in step 2. And so I'm going to do that by writing 2/3 here, and I'm going to set it equal to a fraction over 21, which is our common denominator. And I'm going to figure out what goes in the numerator over 21 by thinking about what do I have to multiply the 3 and 2/3 by to get 21. And I know that 3 times 7 is equal to 21. And so I'm also going to multiply this numerator by 7. And that's going to give me 14 over 21, or 14 21ths maybe, or I'm not exactly sure how you would say that. But we're going to write 14 over 21 as our first equivalent fraction. And I need to do the same thing for 3/7. I need to set 3/7 equal to something over 21. And I need to ask myself the same question as I asked myself for 2/3. What times the denominator in 3/7 is going to give me 21? And so I know that 7 times 3 is going to give me 21. And so if I multiplied the 7 by 3 in the bottom, I got to multiply the 3 by 3 in the top. And that's going to give me 9 over 21. And so I've found my second equivalent fraction, which is 9 over 21. All right, and so now that I have my two equivalent fractions, it's really easy for me to complete step 3, which is just solve. So I'm going to write down 14 over 21 and add it to 9 over 21. And I'm just going to add my two numerators here. And so I have 14 plus 9, and that's going to give me 23. And then I'm going to put that all over the common denominator of 21. And so now I have the solution, or the answer, or the sum of 23 plus, or I'm sorry, 2/3 plus 3/7, which is 23 over 21. All right, and last, I want to show you guys the solution for 3/4 minus 1/5. And we're going to follow the same format as we did before. We're going to follow the 3 steps in order. We're going to find the common denominator, we're going to find the equivalent fractions, and then finally we'll be able to solve. So first, I need to find the equivalent, or I'm sorry, the common denominator between 3/4 and 1/5. And I'm going to do that by multiplying the two denominators. So we have 4 times 5, and that's going to give me 20. And so the common denominator between 3/4 and 1/5 is 20. And so now I can move on to step 2, which is to find the equivalent fractions. So I need to rewrite 3/4 as an equivalent fraction that has 20 in the denominator, because that's the common denominator. So just like before, I'm looking at the 4 in 3/4, and I'm asking myself, okay, what do I have to do to that 4 to get 20? Well, I have to multiply the 4 by 5 to get 20. And if I multiply the 4 by 5, I need to multiply the 3 in the numerator by 5 as well. And 3 times 5 is going to give me 15. And my first equivalent fraction is 15 over 20, or 15/20. And but I'm not done with step 2, because I need to find the equivalent fraction for 1/5 that has the common denominator 20 as its denominator. And I need to look at the 5 and 1/5 and ask myself, okay, what do I multiply the 5 by to get 20? And I need to multiply that 5 by 4 to get 20. And if I multiply the 5 by 4 to get 20, then I also need to multiply the 1 on the top, or the numerator, by 4 as well. And so 1 times 4 is going to give me 4. And I have found my other equivalent fraction. So now I'm set up. I have the common denominator I rewrote my two fractions as equivalent fractions using the common denominator, and now I'm ready for step 3, which is to solve. And the solving part is the easiest part, of course, because all we need to do is write our equivalent fractions here. And all I need to do is just subtract 4 from the 15, and that's going to give me 11. Sorry about that. I wanted to write a 9 for some reason. 15 minus 4 is 11. And then I'm going to put that all over the common denominator of 20. And so now I have my answer, 11/20. So hopefully you were able to get a better understanding of how we can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators using 3 easy steps. And in our next video, I want to show you guys another way that you can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, and that's called the butterfly method. So until then, good luck in math, and as always, ask questions if you encounter any problems or you need any clarification.